I'm here today with another video for you. I'm going to answer some questions about the drama essay. Send me any more questions that you might have. Just a reminder, I'm accepting all work for the course, including this essay, until Thursday, the 14th. Just try to get anything that you can into me by then. Yeah, and let's start looking at these questions here. So the first question that I have for us. Um, well, first, it has here one of the options that I gave you on the assignment sheet says, does the play believe that categories like West and East, male and female are natural? If not, where do they come from and who do they benefit? So let me just say a little bit about this option first. I feel like I haven't talked about it as much as the stereotype one. So it's very related to the stereotypes, right? These categories, East, West, male, female, they're all very much connected with stereotypes, so it's not totally different than the other option. And it kind of goes back to the initial conversation about stereotypes that we had. One of the questions that comes up when we start thinking about it is like, well, if we can all attest in our own lives that these stereotypes, are not actually true, don't really have a correspondence in reality. I think the play also shows us that, also believes that. Um, then the question becomes, well, where do they come from? Why do they believe in? Why do we believe in them? How do they keep on perpetuating? How do they, kind of go from one generation to the next? Why don't they die out? Right? Once we have more information, once we're able to know that they're not exactly true. So I think with this option, I was just thinking really specifically about the Orientalism essay by Edward Said, where he talks a lot about where the concepts about the East came from and how they developed in the European imagination, like he says. And, he attributes it a lot to different kinds of writings. He talks about like non-fiction travel writings that Europeans would write books about going, to what we would call now the Middle East or to China or whatever, and they would write books and they would sell them back in Europe, and people in Europe would read them and say, oh, well, that must be what these people are like, because we're talking about the 1800s or whatever, where people just didn't know. Or obviously in M. Butterfly, the role of the play Madame Butterfly, I think, works this way a lot, right? Stereotypes, rather than being natural, rather than just being something that exists in nature and can be discovered, um, there's something that's created through things like art. For one thing, the way that Madame Butterfly really puts in Gallimard's head the idea of the cad, the Western man who treats the woman cruelly and is manly man and whatever. And on the flip side, his idea of the fragile, delicate Asian woman. Uh, and I think we can see, I think this option, we'd be looking into more, why does M. Butterfly think that these stereotypes exist? Why does M. Butterfly think that they keep on getting perpetuated? And then what are the consequences? Or how I have it here, who do they benefit? Right? And this is, again, I'm thinking of Said, where he talks about how all the relationships between the West and the East were always relationships of power. Every binary that we have, one of them is always meant to be the stronger one. One of them always goes on top, right? So it's in the benefit of Europeans or for Westerners for there to be these stereotypes about the East and West, because it allows them to dehumanize the East, and because it allows them to take all the good stereotypes, quote unquote, for themselves. So I think that's kind of what I was thinking about with that question. So really, you have to turn into your own argument, though, right? You have to say the play shows us that binary categories are whatever are incorrect or harmful or bad, or that they get passed on through different kinds of writings, like pieces of art and government actions and stuff like that. That was another thing with this question where this person says that will help me argue this, also having a hard time. So arguing what exactly, right? The topic that I have here, it's not an argument itself. I gave you questions. So it should really be your response to those questions or to one of specific of them that really makes it an argument for you and really gets you to your thesis. The topic is not the same as your thesis. You have the topic and then you find your argument about it, what you think the play is trying to show us on these topics. And that will work more as your argument. And then, when you're looking for evidence here, kind of the whole plot of the play, right? Song's whole the way that he pretends to be the stereotypical Asian women. I think that shows us that these categories are not natural. Like I said, the role of Madame Butterfly in the play kind of shows us where these stereotypes come from, or at least one place. Also, I think Mark kind of works this way too. He really reinforces a lot of the stereotypes for Gallimard, both about men and women. So these are the kinds of things that I would start to look into if you're interested in writing about this option. All right, let's keep moving on now to the second question. This one says, if my essay is about the East versus West, how should I take the research aspect of the essay? Should it be about how the two powers dehumanize each other and making their rivaling ideologies seem immoral? So the first thing I would look at here with this question, if my essay is about the East versus West, so same thing I was saying with the last question, your essay isn't, about East versus West. You have to have a very specific argument, right? You need a more of a thesis that this is specifically what the essay is trying to show us about the stereotypes around the East and the West. Okay, and then beyond that, the research. So I think there's three different kinds of research that you really want to think about here. One is the two essays that I gave you for homework, Orientalism by Edward Said, and the other one by Doreen Kondo, the essay about M. Butterfly. So both of those, I think, are great essays that relate to the play in very clear ways that I think would be good to include in, for anyone writing about M. Butterfly. So I would definitely start with those two. Go back and read them again. Think if there's a way that they fit into your argument. After that, you can look for essays just about the topic itself. If you're writing about stereotypes or things about the East and the West, try to find some kind of research about that. Could be maybe like some kind of psychological research about how stereotypes work, or like sociology, or how stereotypes function in society, and what the psychological consequences of believing in them, or their existence, or the expectations that they create. Any kind of essay that talks about that. And you can also look for any essay that's just about the play, like that Doreen Kondo one is just an essay about M. Butterfly. So if you look on the databases, there's definitely quite a few of these, or other places online. You can definitely find people writing about M. Butterfly. So that would be another place to go for research. So specifically for this question, the part where this person writes, should it be about how the two powers dehumanize each other and make their rival ideologies seem immoral? I think you want to make sure that you're staying grounded in the play, right? What is the play really trying to show us about like dehumanization, for instance? Is the play really interested in like Song dehumanizing the West or dehumanizing Gallimard? I think the play is a lot more concerned with the stereotypes that are used by the West about the East. Because I think that's kind of the whole basis for the plot, right? Is Gallimard mistaking this Chinese man for the stereotypical butterfly, right? So it's all kind of about the Western inability, uh, inability to see the East as anything other than the kind of fantasies that have been created in operas and stuff like that, and by their military conquests and everything. Um, so I do think that the play itself is more interested in the dehumanizing that the West does, and I mean maybe there's a good reason for that, because America is the country invading Vietnam in the play, right? It's not really like China is not using stereotypes to justify their invasion of any other countries or anything like that. So there's just a little bit on the specifics there. But again, the most important thing is just that you have a clear argument about what you think the play is trying to show us. And as long as you have that, I think it can work. So I make sure we have that, and then we can figure it out. All right, moving on to our third question here. This one starts out. When you say poetry essay, are you talking about the drama essay? Yeah, that's totally my bad. I think I wrote poetry essay in this question. Most people, I think pretty much all of you realize that I'm just a moron, and that I was, of course, talking about the drama essay. So I appreciate for that being included. That's my fault. This stuff has been as crazy for me as it has been for everyone else. So we're all trying to work through it. Continuing on, because that's all I can find, and I understand the story, but I don't know what I really have to talk about. Like I summarize and just explain the stereotypes. So no, don't just summarize and explain the stereotypes. Saying that like there are stereotypes in the story is not an argument, right? What we're doing, going back to what we were doing all semester, right? Literary analysis essay, making an argument about the message you think that the story's sending. So you still need to be doing that here. You're not just telling us what happened and that there are stereotypes in the story and whatever. You're making an argument. The story is trying to show us that stereotypes are harmful because they have bad psychological effects, because they dehumanize people, because they're used to justify war, whatever. You want to be as specific as you can with it, right? That'll help you with this essay a lot. Um, but you want to make sure that you're making a clear argument about what the play is trying to show us about these topics, not just summarizing, right? In fact, like we've said before, any summary you should directly explain how it connects to the argument. You don't need to summarize everything that happens in the play. You should only really focus on the summary that's going to play directly into your argument and that you're going to be using as evidence to help convince us that you're right with the message that you think the text sends. So that's what I would say there. Okay, and our last question for today. It says, what would be a good topic for this essay? Like something that's maybe really good or something you haven't seen a student do in the past? I appreciate this question. I like this question. I do have a couple ideas. I took a class in graduate school where I had to write a 15-page paper on M. Butterfly. So I think I've approached it from just about every angle that you can. Some things that are really interested to me when it comes to this play. One of them is what does the play say about the way that art functions in society? Um, like what does it show us as being the importance of the message that a piece of art sends, really, right? So I'm thinking here mostly of the way that Madame Butterfly functions in the play. Like, what does that show us about the power of art, or how it can influence people, or why literary analysis is really important? I think it's almost like a meta thing where like it's really important that we analyze the pieces of art because if we let a shitty piece of art, a piece of art with a shitty message like Madame Butterfly, if that becomes the most popular, if that's something people are watching so many times when they're young, they're gonna get fucking brainwashed, right? The way that Gallimard is, or not every time, but at least a little bit. That if art is allowed to perpetuate certain stereotypes, that it's only going to be bad for society, right? So I think that's kind of an interesting thing. Like, what does the play think that the role of art is, or why we need to analyze art? That's what I'd be interested in to hear people's thoughts on. Another one that I'm interested in that I don't have on the assignment sheet necessarily is does the play think that the stereotypes can be dismantled? Does it think that we can fight back? Are we all trapped inside of these stereotypes like Gallimard, so that we have to either like become one of them and be like, whatever like shitty version that he is when he feels like he's fitting into the stereotype, or feel bad because we don't fit into the stereotypes, or like him become totally delusional, right? Does it have to be that way? Is there any way to deconstruct these stereotypes, or to get rid of these binary ways of understanding the world? Because one thing that the play does a lot, especially towards the end, is kind of invert the binaries, right? Where the Western man was supposed to be strong and the one to take advantage and everything like that. Um, it kind of flips that where Song is now that and Gallimard is now weak, fragile, delicate, all those things. So that's another thing I'd be interested to read an essay about for this play is like what is the value of inverting these binaries? How can we try to go against these stereotypes? Can they be dismantled? Um, yeah, seeing what the play thinks on those subjects, I think would be super interesting. And I'll give you one more. I don't really have this one as much fully thought out, but just like what is the role of cross-dressing in this play? It plays a really prominent part, right? Song is, dressing as a woman basically the entire time. The play ends with Gallimard. So not only does Gallimard have to say that like I'm Butterfly now, right? He also has to put on the kimono and put on the wig. And the stage direction is really conscious to talk about what they're wearing and where it comes from. Like, Song has to completely get naked for Gallimard to like really get that he's a man and see what's really been going on. So there's something about clothes. I don't know how they contribute to our identity. Maybe how like we think about people's gender more based on how they present themselves than what their gender or their sex like biologically is. Something about how gender is like constructed and the role of clothes in that. I don't know. I don't really know where to go with that, but that's something I've always been interested with this play. Just like what's going on with all the cross dressing. What point is it trying to make about the role that clothes play and gender and sexuality and stuff. That'd be cool to hear about. A couple of other things I want to emphasize before I end this video. If you're having trouble getting started on the essay, the way that I would try to start is, first we want to try to come up with a thesis, right? So I would look back at the assignment sheet, see the options that I have. Start with the question, one of the questions that I have. What is the play trying to show us about stereotypes? What is the play showing us the consequences of stereotypes are? And then your answer to that can be a thesis, right? Once you have a thesis, the next thing that I would do, this is just personally, maybe where you want to do it differently, but one thing that always works for me when I have trouble to get started is so writing the thesis out and then kind of going through and finding quotes that I know that I'm going to use. Any quote that you know is going to come up at some point, just go find it, copy paste, throw that in the essay, and then you can kind of start building from there, right? Because then you put in how that quote is going to relate back to your thesis, and now you get a few more sentences, and then you introduce the quote, and then you start just kind of like building, from the inside out and kind of getting paragraphs going. I think I've said before, don't feel like you have to start with the introduction. A lot of the times we don't know what we're really trying to say until we start saying it. So don't feel like you have to finish the introduction first. Start with a thesis, look for some quotes, and then from there, maybe you can build like a little outline of what each paragraph is going to be about. Like, okay, in this paragraph, it's going to be about, maybe the way that stereotypes affect Gallimard when he's younger, or looking at those flashback scenes. And you know that you're going to use a quote about when Mark calls him a wimp, or the thing with the magazines and stuff. So I would go in there, find those quotes, and then you start to build out that paragraph, and then maybe you can get an outline going. And just having that little bit of organization before you really, start looking at the blank Word document. Having the organization done a little bit on the front end makes it a lot easier to just kind of get rolling and get some stuff done. Other than that, send me any more specific questions that you have. Remember, like I said about research, to look back at those essays I gave you, look for stuff on the topic, look for other essays about M. Butterfly. Yeah, I think that's all that I have for now. I'll talk to you soon.